I tell you what, there is nothing like bouncing your lure across the bottom as you retrieve it, hitting the rocks and sticks, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, bam, like a wide receiver on a crossing route,
Down the sideline for
your lure gets destroyed. And this kind of lure right here, a square bill crankbait, makes that kind of excitement possible all the time for me in ponds and lakes. My name's Tyler, this is the Mach Bouncer. Let's talk about it. Hey, there's one. I got one with an audience. How about that? Not a bad little one. Get in here. Hey, popped right off. Look at that. Little guy. What's going on, Mach Nation? My name is Tyler, and my goal is to help you guys become better anglers and catch more fish and understand more about your lures. This video today is all about the brand new Mach Bouncer square bill. So first off, what is a square bill crankbait? First, let's take apart the name to understand what that means. It's a square bill crankbait. Square bill means that the bill on the front of the bait that allows it to dive into the water is usually some kind of square-ish or square resembling shape. And a crankbait is a hard plastic bait that when retrieved back to the bank, to your kayak, to the boat, actually dives into the water to usually a certain specified depth. Lipless crankbaits have a slightly different definition, but for most crankbaits, this is what you're looking at. Now, like I said, every crankbait has a depth that it dives to and cannot really go any deeper than, and a square bill can really not go any deeper than 5 to 6 feet. This one here is built to go 3 to 6 feet, depending on the retrieve speed and your line size. The Bouncer, as the name would imply, is designed to deflect off of cover incredibly well, even for a treble hooked lure. Now, it's not gonna be as wide of a wobble side to side or tail wobble side to side as some square bills will. It is a little bit more slender of a body, but in terms of shallow cover, rocks and sticks, this is an amazing square bill crankbait. So now the question is, where is the Mach Bouncer actually useful? Where should you be throwing a square bill? Well, the first place is shallow, hard cover. I'm talking rocks and wood. I'm not talking shallow, mucky bottoms, muddy bottoms, snot grass, non-healthy vegetation. You want to be throwing it around the healthiest, cleanest looking stuff possible because it is a treble hooked bait that is supposed to make contact with the bottom. So it's easily going to pick up any kind of dirt and debris. So like I said, you want the cleanest bottom possible. And one thing I know is true is that bait fish love to hang around rocks. So if you see this, there is a high likelihood your bass are eating bait fish, and so throwing a bouncer would be a really smart idea. Now, one thing that is crucial about the bouncer, we're going to talk about in retrieval here in a second, is that if you're fishing in a kayak or a bass boat or the bank, you want to be paralleling your bait along the bank. So whether it's wood, whether it's rocks, whether it's just a hard, clean bottom, you want your bait to be going parallel to that cover and not casting to an object. I'm not saying you can't catch any target casting with the bouncer, because you can. But if you want the best chances of catching fish, you want to cover water, walk fast, paddle fast, really make a whole lot of casts and parallel, as I'll show you on the screen. Now, one thing to understand about the bouncer is that it is an incredibly risky lure to throw around shallow wood. So if you are a bank fisherman and you don't have the opportunity, if you get snagged, to go out to your snag to get it back, I would recommend not throwing the bouncer, but instead throwing another mock bait like the slack jaw, because that's also a crankbait, also can be fished well in shallow water, but can be retrieved really, really fast to keep it higher in the water column, away from those sticks and those snags. The bouncer, like I said, it's intended to hit the bottom, so let it hit the bottom. But if you're afraid about losing lures and you know you're in a really snaggy environment, it's probably best to not risk it, and so don't throw this thing. Now, real quick, let's head on the water and talk about the retrieval with the bouncer. Now, when it comes to the retrieval of the bouncer, it really falls into line with kind of the rest of the moving bait categories. So for the majority, it's cast and retrieve. There's not really any specific cadence you have to give the lure on your retrieve. Now, you can, that's the caveat. You can, with a square bill, give it a reeling and stop. Reeling and stop, I call it a stop and go retrieve. You can do a, let's get a cast out here, get it down to the bottom, and then maybe do a big sweep, and then pause. And then reel in your slack and do another big sweep, and then pause. You gotta really figure out what the fish on your body of water want, but for the most part, I found they will bite a simple, slow retrieve like this, occasionally speeding it up, giving it a pause, speeding it up again. I really like to vary my retrieve. Can you catch them just casting and winding straight back in? you can. But I do think fish, especially with a bait like this that's designed to bounce off of cover, I'm gonna keep using the word bounce because it's the bouncer. I think that you should err more on the side of more variation in your retrieve than less with this bait. But one thing to keep in mind that I've noticed with this square bill that I haven't seen in some of the other ones that I fish is that you have to have 2 or 3 slow turns of the reel handle to get that bait diving down. As you guys saw and I talked about in the design of the bait, it is kind of a bill that slenders down closer to the bait's head itself, and so it needs a little bit slower of a retrieve, similar to a suspending jerk bait, to get that bait down to its diving depth before you can then start burning that bait back to you. If you make a cast and then start burning it, oftentimes the bait will spiral on the surface because that bill doesn't have enough grab of that water to get it down there. So cast it out there, give it a few slow turns, and then you'll be able to start retrieving fast. Now, if you're fishing from a boat or a kayak, your options for where you can throw a bouncer open up dramatically as compared to the shore. Let's go on the water and see one of those specific use cases for the bouncer.
Gosh, there's one. There's one. What do we got? What the heck do we got here? Oh, a little guy around a piece of floating cover.
Oh, chill. Well, one thing that is definitely true about the bouncer is that it has an erratic action in the water, and so I cast this thing right next to a floating little metal dock thing, and this guy came out and nabbed it. So it's not just a shallow cover and rock bait, it can also be used in open water. Who would have thought? Gonna make a cast over here and bounce, if you don't mind me saying it, bounce it against the side of this metal floating thing. Because I really think there's a huge misunderstanding within shallow crankbaits that you have to be actually bouncing it across the bottom or the cover that's near the bottom. That's not the case. You can throw a square bill across any kind of floating cover, really just bounce it across anything and you will elicit a strike from something. Now, I did want to talk real quick about the rod, reel, and line for a square bill crankbait. So the great thing is you don't need a specific combo for a square bill. You can use the same one you use for Texas frigs or worms, but you've got to understand something about a moving bait, especially a treble hooked moving bait. If you're retrieving it back to you, it has a force being added to it. And especially if a bass eats it and goes the opposite way, the fish is almost gonna set the hook on itself. You don't need a heavy power, fast tapering action rod. You can actually get away with a medium or a medium heavy, moderate rod. And so I love throwing the Mach 1 speed stick. It is a 7.2 medium heavy, fast taper. But how I adjust for that what I call too heavy of a rod is that I really don't set the hook at all. When a fish eats it, I kind of lean into that fish and I don't feel the need to set the hook really hard because the fish is going to hook itself in the majority of cases. And in the fall, the winter, the early spring, oftentimes a fish's mouth is more tender, and so it's actually really easy to rip the treble hooks out of their mouth. So if you can, throw your bouncer on a medium action rod, and I promise you'll have more success, not just getting bites, because the rod doesn't necessarily get you more bites, but hooking up with those fish and getting them to the bank or to the boat, you're gonna have more success with a medium rod or a medium heavy as long as you adjust your hook set. So that's gonna be it for the Mach Bouncer. I'm excited to catch some big bass on this coming spring and summer, and I think you guys should be excited as well. Pick one up for yourself and give it a try. It bounces. Now, you'll bounce your way to victory. Now, they can't kick you out of the club if you are the bouncer. Now, it's just dawning on me, the paint jobs on this thing are fantastic. Enough talking, I'm going to catch a fish.